Senator Waters.
Thanks very much, Chair. Hi there, Dr Raquel, Mr
Senator.
Elliott. Thanks everyone for coming. Can I start off with the sea dumping permit for the Abbott Point Coal Terminal? What's the status of that permit?
Could I ask you to handle that, please?
Bruce Elliott, General Manager, Biodiversity, Conservation and Sustainable Use at the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority. Senator, the current status of that permit is that it's still under legal challenge in the administrative.
Sorry, can you be nice and loud for me?
Sorry, it's still under challenge in the
courts.
In the courts, in the tribunal.
Is it cancelable?
The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park legislation, the Act and the regulations, do have conditions under which permits can be revoked, but it has to satisfy certain criteria for that to occur.
And in your view, are those criteria, any of those satisfied as yet?
They wouldn't be met under the current circumstances, Senator.
Okay. Has the Minister or even the Queensland Government asked for the authority's advice on those criteria to cancel the sea dumping permit?
No, they haven't, Senator.
Okay. Okay, just moving to the dumping regulation that the Minister announced at the World Parks Congress that's, I understand, still under development. What input, you said earlier in response to another Senator's question that you were working with the Minister to implement that commitment. What input are you having into the formulation of those regulations?
When I say working with it, providing, it's really hard for me to say too much about it because it's essentially with the Minister. So I'd have to refer you to the Minister for the specifics. But I can assure you that we are having considerable input in providing information about the policy intent of the Minister. And I think I should leave it there. Do you think?
Is there anything that...
We can come back later, Senator, in the later session on the reef and regulation about these matters when officers are here.
1.1 or 1.5, just to be clear?
1.5, yeah. Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Senator, I was just conferring with my colleague. I should make it clear that we're leading the development of the regulation for our Act, and our board has taken a decision already to make to put in place what's needed at the board level for the as on our website at the moment, and we're leading the development for the Minister.
So the board has had input into the policy formulation and the advice that's gone to the Minister?
At this stage, they've endorsed management to work with the Minister to because it's the authority who, under the provisions of making regulations, would once the direction comes from the Minister, the authority, meaning the board, formally under the Act makes a decision to progress that back with government, and we're now working with the Minister.
And has the board had any input into the details of the regulation?
I could refer you to the decision of the board, but the board discussed very soon after the policy intention was made by the Minister, endorsed the, in principle, development of a ban on capital dredge spoil.
Have they had any further involvement other than simply endorsing the Minister's
Well, they haven't met since then, but they're meeting next month, in a few weeks. So it'll be on our agenda to discuss it and brief the board.
Okay, this is the same board that had been investigated for having conflict of interest for mining and gas interests, or have you had a change of board since that investigation?
No, it's the same.
Same board.
Same board.
And cleared, Senator.
Beg your pardon?
And cleared, Senator.
Well, that's true. That investigation did clear them, although I personally disagree with the investigation, but that's irrelevant for the present purposes. Thank you. I might follow up with some more questions on notice on that particular point. I'm interested in whether the authority has heard from the Queensland Government regarding extending the dumping ban to the World Heritage Area rather than just the marine park.
No, I haven't, and so no, we haven't had dialogue. I've simply exchanged correspondence with the incoming Minister, Minister Miles. He's agreed that we'll meet in due course. I think it was too soon after the election, but I'm looking forward to having that dialogue with Queensland.
And how will the authority be placed in those negotiations, given that the federal government wants to limit capital dumping in the marine park, whereas the incoming Queensland government wants that to occur in the larger World Heritage Area?
I think that will be worked out between ministers, I would think, in terms of how the policies interact. In other words, the policy intention would come from the government, the minister, just as Minister Hunt's made his policy intention clear. And I think the interaction with the World Heritage Area for the Queensland legislation and the national legislation, being outside the marine park, is yet to unfold. I haven't had those conversations with colleagues.
And would you be expected to provide scientific advice to either of those governments about the preferred area for that ban to cover?
I'm sure that we'd be consulted about the implications of policy ideas that the Queensland government have promised in election, but we've yet to see the detail.
Okay, so has Minister Hunt yet sought your views on whether or not the ban should be extended to the full World Heritage Area?
No, the Minister Hunt's given us his policy intent with capital in the marine park, and to the extent that he may be in discussions with his Queensland colleagues, I'm not. I refer you to the Minister on that
sure.
one.
Okay, can I move quickly to the 180-degree policy change of the Queensland government at least, and arguably of the federal government as well, to move away from offshore dumping, particularly for the Albert Point coal terminal expansion, and to then insist that that be an onshore dump site in a very rapid manner. Do you have any sense of what the cause of that change of position was? Did the authority provide any scientific basis that might have caused that change of position?
Okay, I think the second half of that question's okay. It was getting perilously close to asking for opinions, but...
Thanks, Senator, Minister. There were a number of things occurring middle of last year, including release of our Outlook report, which revised downwards concerns about water quality. I think I would be just giving opinions if I was to ask to prioritise the other things, and many of which are political. We did give advice on options for compaction and drying of material that were new, middle of last year. So
Middle of last year, did you say?
Yes, so that's when I became aware of them, and so I think technology changed. Our assessments changed, but beyond that, I think there's so many other factors of which are financial, public opinion, and things that would just be an opinion of mine.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned earlier that water quality is one of the key threats to the reef after, of course, climate change, which I hope all accept is the biggest threat to the reef. What's the impact of cutting $40 million out of that $200 million reef rescue program, which was supporting farmers to improve their sustainability practices and reduce runoff to the reef?
Reef rescue, I think I'd have to refer to the department, Senator.
Senator, are you referring there to Reef Trust, the $40 million in Reef Trust? Or okay.
That was taken out of reef rescue.
That came out of the National Land Care Program, yes. So there are a number of projects which are being funded under the first phase of reef rescue. So just bear with me a second.
Thank you. I guess I'm particularly interested in whether the Marine Park Authority has a view on the scientific implications of reducing funding to that program, which you inferred was a successful one, which I agree has made some good gains. So
we haven't done a specific analysis along that line, Senator. We work very closely with the Intergovernmental Organising Committee. We sit on that. We help us set priorities for best outcomes for investment, which then goes on to the ministerial forums. So we're actively involved, but we haven't done a specific analysis. But I will say though that the interaction with the Reef Trust is highly relevant. I mean, they're very compatible pieces of policy to influence farmers and to restore habitats. So it would not be a simple matter to take them apart in terms of the outcomes.
So it's just a different name, but essentially the same sort of stuff's happening. Is that your view?
Well, I think we've seen a shift to that restoration. The issue is more complex than simply farm practice, is what we're seeing in the last year, which I would agree with.
Okay, but you haven't done a specific analysis of the impact on the reef of the reduction of the 40 million from the reef rescue program?
Not the way you framed that, no.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I agree with you that it's an important program, as is the Reef Trust.
And Senator, I wouldn't just characterise it as a change of name. I think the Reef Trust has ambitions of a longer sense than a program that, as is often the case with programs, have a defined funding period. The Reef Trust is, of course, seeking to establish itself in a longer-term duration in terms of being able to provide leadership in the funding and rollout of programs that support the successful management of the reef. And as Mr. Thompson's indicated, we can happily go through what some of those are and other areas of the couple of $100 million in expenditure in the relevant section.
Yeah, thank you. I'll do that later on today. You mentioned earlier, again in response to another senator's question, that the mouth of the Fitzroy shouldn't be developed. Have you shared that view with Minister Hunt?
What I was implying there was that whatever occurred there, the functionality of that delta should be retained. So development, any more human activity in that area would need to be sensitive to allowing the delta to function. So what that means for development would be individually assessed, no doubt. I would say Minister Hunt's very well aware of the importance of the Lower Fitzroy from discussions I've had with him.
Okay, so you've specifically mentioned that to him in your discussions?
Yes, it's a widely held view. It's an important area.
Indeed. Are you aware whether there's anything being done about that? In a legal sense, is it projects? What's the status of previous proposals? Can I just check with my colleague?
You probably have to refer it to the department.
Yeah, it would be EPBC rather than Marine Park, Senator. So the department may be able to answer.
Again now or later?
We come back later on, Senator.
Okay, thank you. So again, the Gabrumpa hasn't yet provided advice to the Minister on how to better protect the delta, for example?
No, other than to retain its functionality as a place where the water spreads out, slows down and acts as a silt trap.
Okay, thank you. I want to move now to, actually one further thing before we move to Reef Plan. The Dredge synthesis panel, I think we were due to see the results of that mid last year. What's happened? Where is that?
The project began mid last year, I think May, and it's very close to finalising. It should be, I'm thinking weeks, not months. It's in formatting and pre-production now.
Right, I thought that it had begun earlier and was due to report in the second half of last year. Have the timeframes changed?
The panels might have had ambitions to report in the second half of last year, but I thought it did begin in May.
What was the cause for the delayed report date?
We let the panel set their own timelines. We didn't give them a cut-off date to finish it. They met at least 3 times, is that right? Or were consulted 3 times?
The panel came together for a workshop once, but there was a lot of interaction between panel members and the lead authors in compiling the document. The document was still undergoing production up to late last year. The pre-publication activities such as formatting, proofing, ensuring it's correct for accessibility for web production, etc., has what has been going on since. And as Dr. Reichelt said, it's very near ready for publication.
Okay, so you've had sort of 7 weeks to do formatting. What's the interaction between the release of that report and the dumping regulations? Have you been asked to go slow on the report until the regs are released, or?
No, it's available resources. There's no, we've had no go slow or no direction at all on that report. The soonest we can get it out, the better, from my point of view.
Sure. Do you anticipate that the results of that report will be factored into the drafting of the dumping regulation?
It all depends on the timing. I'm sure that the report will inform all future decisions around dredging, including scientific research, because they were asked to. But I think the report should speak for itself when it's released.
How are you anticipating the report will influence decisions? Is it going to be a mandatory consideration under the EPBC Act? Is it going to be a tool for the minister to consider? What's the sort of intended purpose for the influence of the report?
It's meant to inform the public and the scientific community and government on the state of knowledge of dredging activities. It will, I think, it will set scientific agendas because, like any group of scientists, will always find more research is needed. And it will, I think, inform future environmental impact assessments in terms of what they specify as information they may need. Can I just check with any other implications?
No, the only thing I'd add would be that that last point there, I would expect to inform things like terms of reference for impact assessments, etc. It'll very much help guide the sorts of questions that need to be answered.
Thank you.
Senator, can I say, from a Marine Park Authority point of view and colleagues at AIMS, we've been very careful to let the panel do their work. We haven't edited it. We've and they've seen all the drafts the rapporteurs put together. We'll publish it, but we want it really clearly understood that we haven't. It's the panel's work.
Sure. Just back to that term of reference point, Mr. Elliott. Given that much of the big dredging proposals have already been applied for, and those terms of reference therefore have already been set, do you anticipate that any of those terms of reference would then be amended to require consideration of this new report, or is it going to be something that applies to future dredging applications, of which there may be few?
There's nothing to prevent information at any stage of an environmental impact process to being included. The numbers of proposals has decreased steadily over the last 12 months for various reasons. So there's that's documented. I believe will be documented in a preface or something to give a context for the review. So I would assume that at any project at any stage will need to now look at this, and whether it can affect the terms of reference is probably more of a legal question. Once they're set, they've been set.
Well, I'm pleased to hear you say that you think that any project should take these findings into account. I likewise agree. Let's hope that happens. I've just got two more chunks, Chair, if you don't mind.